Hi, folks. This is Bobby Carlton from Lioness Magazine. I'm also the founder of Innovation Women. And today we are here to talk about an incredible study. It's called Balancing the Boardroom, Navigating the Path to Equitable Leadership. And today we have with us Nycole Walsh from Kickstand and Leslie Greenwood from Wednesday Women. And they are the authors. They are the responsible folks for this amazing study. And I have so many questions for them. But first, I'm going to ask them to do quick introductions so we know who we're talking to. So Nycole, can you go first?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on today, Bobby. Yes, I'm Nycole Walsh. I work at Kickstand. We are a tech PR firm built for high growth companies. We're woman owned. I wear a lot of hats over there. So I came up through the marketing arm doing research, influencer marketing, content, social media. Now I also oversee digital rev ops. So doing lots of stuff over there.
Fantastic. Welcome. And Leslie.
Hi, I'm Leslie Greenwood. I am the co-founder of Wednesday Women. We are an organization really built to uplift executive women leaders, getting them on more stages, podcasts, panels, in more people's feeds, and just really sharing their authentic voices.
Fantastic. This sounds like a incredible opportunity because we are all working toward the same goal, getting more women, more visibility. So I want to start off and kick off this conversation with a discussion about the purpose of this study that you conducted in February 2024. Did this play out like you expected? Are there any kind of big surprises for you in the results from this study? Nycole?
I was pretty surprised by multiple aspects of this study. And I think part of that comes down to my personal experience. Before I came into marketing and PR, I worked in healthcare, which is a very female dominated field. And then, of course, I came straight into Kickstand, which is extraordinarily progressive on women's issues. So I think I'm pretty sheltered. And I did not expect to see some of the stark disparities in things like employer support. Like, I knew that this was still a problem, but I didn't think the data was going to bear it out quite so dramatically. And like, we got some triple digit stats that basically made my eyeballs pop out when it came to things like employer support. Um, I think perhaps because of my background, I was also a little bit surprised to see the numbers show how glaringly prevalent we still have kind of a guys club mentality when it comes to opportunities with senior leadership. So I think there were multiple areas in this study where I was wearing some rose-colored glasses for the corporate world that I had to rip off.
Okay. And Leslie, you got involved in this. Where is this coming from for you?
Yeah, for me, I think, coming from a different generation than Nycole, the words, when people ranked the words that were used as to tell how, if you were good, you were a good girl if you were quiet, if you were polite, and you were a good boy if you were brave. And, of course, and this, obviously took multiple generations into account. I knew what my generation told me. I did not think that still was happening in today's world. Like, I thought that would be lesser because we become more progressive parents. It just shows how ingrained that these words and messages are. And in my conversations with people after the study, I hear the exact same thing, even if I'm talking to a 27-year-old. And to me, that's mind-blowing.
Wow. All right. I'd love to hear a little bit about the participants in this study. So you surveyed 622 office workers in management roles or higher. This is in February 2024. Let's talk about the breakdowns. Like, tell us about the survey participants.
Yeah, so we sort of let natural fallout happen within the qualifiers that we set out. We did want people who were in management, who clearly had leadership on their minds, and We wanted it to be a pretty female heavy group. Within that, we allowed pretty natural fallout. So generationally, we got about 10% of our pool from Gen Z, 51% from millennials, 32% were Gen Xers, and 7% baby boomers, which is about the spread that you see on any kind of online research. In terms of gender, we really wanted the female sample to be able to stand alone as its own sample. So we got 522 women. It made up about 83% of the pool. And we got a comparison group, statistically significant, of 100 men that made up about 16%. We were not able to get a statistically significant group of non-binary respondents. In terms of role and title, we got a lot of our response from middle management, about 41%, 11% of our response came from senior management and leadership. Then we got a much smaller percentage up at the top, owners, founders made up about 5% of the pool, C-suite execs about 1%. We got vice president and directors at about 4%. So again, we got pretty natural fallout in terms of title. I could also go deeply into the demographic split when it comes to marital status, number of children. We got about half of, a little less than half of our respondents did not have children versus about half that did. And then we got a pretty standard split when it comes to race and ethnicity. When we run surveys, we allow people to select as many options as they want. So this is never, it never adds up to 100%, but we got a large response out of the white Caucasian community. Our second highest response came out of the Black and African American community at 21%. And then after that, it came East Asian, Asian American, Hispanic, and all of this breakout is in the data, so I won't babble about it for too long, but I thought we got a pretty diverse group.
Gotcha. And we will also have a link in the story that goes with this interview. Now, from the results, we saw that 59% of the women in leadership roles had their sights set on the C-suite, and half are dreaming of a corporate board. What's the equivalent for men?
So 65% of men in leadership roles are eyeing the C-suite. That makes them about 10% more likely to say that than women in the study. And then 50% of men were looking at joining a corporate board someday. So they were 21% more likely than women to say this.
Okay. And 63% of the women who aspire to join the C-suite think they can get there versus 82% of men say the same. Let's talk about roadblocks. Like, why do women see these roadblocks? Leslie, is this something that your group is talking about and working on?
It's something we're definitely talking about. We saw this very clearly. We don't have data. I'm going to tell you some stories. So our first event we held in San Francisco. We had 30 executive women there. The table discussions were curated of top challenges. And I would say the thing that stuck out to me most, that I heard more times than any other thing that we talked about, were freezing eggs. I'm about to be going on maternity leave, and I'm not sure how I'm going to enter work after this second child. And so, because we did a give to get. So, I need, has anybody else frozen their eggs? And how did they go about deciding and considering? And then 3 or 4 people are like, yeah, here, I'll come talk to you. And so for me, in this business setting, these are some of the things that really stood out to me. And I think that definitely in the survey shows that going on parental leave, especially as a woman, affects your general trajectory.
Yeah. Anything you want to add on that, Nycole, in terms of those roadblocks? And do men see these same roadblocks or different ones? I'm assuming they aren't going to be talking about egg freezing.
I don't think they're worried about freezing their eggs, but I think, it starts so early. I think when we looked at people who said that they wanted to join the C-suite or wanted to join a corporate board, we also asked them, do you have the dedication? Do you have the leadership skills? And do you have the business acumen to do so? Women and men in roughly equal numbers said they had the skills, they had the dedication. Women massively underestimated themselves when it came to their business acumen. So I think it starts with confidence. And, if you look through the whole report, we hit on basically everything from communication bias to parental leave, of course, which has been covered by a lot of other studies, but you can't not talk about it. And so I think it starts early on with barriers when it comes to the confidence that we are instilled with early in life. And then it continues. It's just like reinforced by challenges that we are confronted with, practical challenges like Leslie just talked about, that are disproportionate. So
it's almost like bragging. If you say, I have this, yes, of course, I have the skills to make it to the C-suite. That even me makes it feels uncomfortable to me to say that out loud. And so I think probably that and the conditioning that we kind of talk about in the study also may play into that data point.
This is a great opportunity to dive into that childhood messaging section of the study, which kudos. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. And we're talking about qualities that are valued. Women are more likely to be encouraged to be obedient. There was a 10% difference there. One of the biggest differences seemed to be around brave. Can you two talk about that?
First of all, thank you for the compliment on this section of the study. It was my very favorite part of the data. I think it gave us so much, and it really revealed so much about the subtle differences in the ways that we talk to kids. So yeah, the bravery thing, like you said, that was the biggest stat. Yeah, men were 267% more likely to say that they were encouraged to be brave as kids. And when you look at the rankings on that, so we gave respondents, essentially, we gave them 24 different adjectives to choose from, sort of a mix of positive and negative ones, saying like, what did it mean to be, or maybe I shouldn't say negative ones, negative in my mind, things like quiet, things like submissive, and said like, pick 5 of these that most represent what it meant to be a good child in your home growing up. So out of those 24, if you look at men, bravery ranks 12th on the list out of those 24, with 11% of men saying that this was a very prized quality when they were growing up. For women, that falls to the bottom of the list, basically almost all the way to 21st on the ranked list, with only 3% of them saying that this was encouraged in their childhood. And then, when you pair that stat alongside the stats about how much more likely women were to say that they were encouraged to be obedient, quiet, submissive, I think it really starts to paint a picture.
Leslie? Is that something that was discussed? The bravery, the submissive, obedient, was that something that your group talks about at all, or is this something new that's being raised up by the study?
Honestly, I'm not a research aficionado, but I think, again, like you said, kudos to Nycole for, adding this into it, because it adds a whole nother layer into the conversation. I think it's so family dependent. Like when I talked to my co-founder, Melissa Moody, she was the only girl of boys, and she was taught to be brave. She was, was it coxswain on an all men's rowing team. Like that's what her job was. Like, so she never experienced any of those things. And so, yeah, no, not specifically, but just like anecdotally, it's just so interesting to see, the differences even with people that I know who are in the same position as me. I think a lot of them are getting to the point where I am now, where I'm not afraid to be brave. I'm not afraid to be outspoken. I'm not afraid to give less Fs, which is my whole motto for the year. But I'm 53 and it's taken me 52 years to get there. Yeah. And so that's, yeah, no. So I was just saying, so that's where I see it, is that, I'm there, I'm brave now, but it took me a real long time to get there.
That same section talked a little bit about the smile more. Like women are 94% more likely to be told to smile more. And more than half of the men have never been told this. Like that to me was like, oh yeah, I guess that makes sense, logically. I'm wondering how many women said they had never been told this.
I was actually surprised that the number for women was as high as it was, because about 38% of women said that they've never been told they should smile more. And I'm shocked by that number. I feel at the time that I wrote this study, I had a stranger on the street tell me to smile within the last couple of weeks. This is an experience that has happened to me personally so many times. So, but when you look at that against men, 55% of men said they've never heard that. That's still a 45% difference, and that's huge. It was at first I hypothesized that this might be coming from younger generations, and that when I broke down the data, I was going to see that this message is becoming more and more obsolete and falling into disuse as the generations come up. But that did not bear out in the data when I went and looked at that angle. What I did find was an interesting regional split, where women in the Midwestern United States were about, I think, 16% more likely than average compared against other women to say that they heard that growing up. So we did see some interesting regional, yeah.
I'm straight from the Midwest. Mm-hmm. So, and I do hear that. I hear you read that on LinkedIn all the time. I was taken into my boss's office, and part of my review was to smile more. And it's so inappropriate.
Yeah, I will say that personally, I had been gifted a coach back in the 90s from one of the bosses. And part of it was around attire and demeanor and friendliness. And part of the conversation was be more open and approachable, smile more. Let's not go there right now, okay? I want to dive into the part, because I have a personal interest in this, about speaking at conferences and events. So most of the viewers know I also own Innovation Women, which is an online speaking platform. So I was all over this data. And by the way, everybody I knew sent me the link to the study, even though I'd already seen it on my own, because obviously it's one of those things that people are like, Bobby needs to see this. So women were 21% more likely than men to have never applied for a speaking slot at a conference or events. Let's talk about these numbers. What percentage of men and women had applied, and what insights into who applied and who's been accepted versus not accepted? What can you tell us here?
This is one of those areas of the study where I wish I'd been able to fit in some follow-up questions that I couldn't and didn't. But, what I do have is, yes. So for this set of questions, what we did was, first we asked respondents to choose from a list of career building activities which of those activities they felt would be personally beneficial to their career. Then for the activities that they selected, they went to a follow-up question, and we said, okay, for these ones that you chose, when was the last time you did it? Within the last 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, more than a year, or have you never done it? So that's sort of how we framed this question. We did not then go on to ask if they had been accepted, but yeah. So for those, the 21% you gave of women who have never applied, those are women who have already said it would help their career and have still never done it. For a little bit more sort of granularity into what those numbers looked like, of the women who did say that they have applied, we've got 15% who have done so in the last 3 months, 11% in the last 6 months, 11% in the last year, and then only 16% said it's been over a year since they applied. If you look at men, of the men who have applied to speak, none of them did so in the last 3 months. 8% in the last 6 months, 20% in the last year, or 21% last year, sorry. And then 33% said it's been over a year. So if you look at that spread, which I know I kind of went through a little quickly just now, what it appears to me is that women who are applying to speak are doing so much more consistently. But anecdotally, I think we can all agree that that extra effort is not really translating into equal representation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know that about 2/3 of all conference speakers are men, which leaves women out of this amazing amount of visibility that drives careers and drives businesses. So with those raised with an emphasis on being quiet, like where obviously women overrepresent, they were 57% less likely to say they've recently applied. Like, let's talk about those numbers. Like, what were the correlations there? And like, it sounds like, just from my read, when you are telling somebody that, there's an emphasis on being quiet, they are not going to go out and seek out public speaking opportunities. Makes sense.
Yeah, that was exactly what I hypothesized going in. And I specifically wanted to go in and look at that data cut of people who said that they were raised with an emphasis on quiet to see the impact that it did have. So yeah, I think 5% of men said that being good in their childhood meant being quiet versus 10% of women who said the same. And then when it came to applying for those speaking spots, if you take men and women completely out of the equation and you just look at the quiet cut, those who were raised with an emphasis on quiet were, like you said, 57% less likely than average to say that they've applied within the last 3 months. So 14% overall had applied in the last 3 months versus only 6% of the group that was raised with an emphasis on quiet, which, like you said, women are vastly overrepresented in that group. So I think it takes the men and women out of the equation for a second and just looks at the messaging and the implications of that messaging.
And
I want to just throw, I'm sorry, I just want to throw a thought in there. Just even the verbiage of that question, how many men have applied? Many men, in my opinion and experience, don't apply. They get chosen. And so that could skew data because they are not applying. They have been already pre-chosen as a speaker, where women were throwing out applications all the time trying to get that coveted speaking spot somewhere. So just a general observation with no facts around it except for my own personal opinion and a thought.
I think that's interesting insight though, Leslie, and kind of gives another view of the stats that I just gave that show that women are sort of investing a lot more activity into this application process. So I think that's an interesting point.
Yeah. And let's talk about employer support for speaking. You had some amazing numbers there. And I'm curious about the levels and the difference in support as we move up the ladder.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I was so glad that you asked that question too, because we looked at women were 208% more likely to say that their employer does not support their efforts to apply for these speaking engagements. And your question, is do we get closer to that support as we move up? Yes. The answer is yes. So women in like junior and middle management who have support for these efforts, we had about 62%. Women in senior leadership get better support, at about 82% of them say that they're getting the support that they need. But, this is a big but, if you look at men in junior and middle management, 87% of them at that lower level say they already had that support versus 62% of women in junior and middle management. So while, yes, we do see the support numbers start to improve for women as they move up the corporate ladder into these more senior roles, men seem to start with a much broader platform of employer support earlier in their careers. And I think they're 40% more likely based on those numbers to report that they get this support than their female counterparts, which is a very stark variance.
That's huge numbers and a big difference. What about support from our partners? Women in leadership, 42% more likely to report a spouse or partner who isn't supportive of these opportunities. Can you two talk about that?
The only thing I can say, from a numbers nerd perspective, is that this is where we don't see any change. Women in junior and middle management roles were just as likely as those in the upper rungs of organizations to report that they did not have a spouse or a partner who was supportive of travel and after hours work.
Leslie, what about from your perspective? You know,
I
is
don't know.
there?
That seems weird to me. My husband is so supportive. I mean, like, I'm going to be gone all of October, and he's like, "Cool, football's on. You won't schedule me for anything." So I don't. It doesn't compute. But also, you know, I'm a bolder woman who just like doesn't care.
I was surprised by this, Bobby, because I guess, and I wouldn't expect it to be like a causation thing. I would expect to see some sort of correlation, though, where like women who were even able to rise to these more senior levels within their organizations would have had some better support. It just seems like that support would have made them more likely to be able to make those accomplishments. So that was surprising.
I can't say that I'm in the same category as Leslie. My husband stayed home and took care of our kids from the get-go. Our kids are now 27 and 22, and he now works for my companies. And it's not football, it's hockey in our house. So he's like, yeah, have fun. I'm watching a hockey game. Boy, that sounded so stereotypical. But at the same time, like, having a partner support after hours activities, that is what you're looking at frequently when it comes to public speaking opportunities. I usually talk about the numbers from the Bureau of Labor Statistics when it comes to speaking. And women are more likely to say yes to invitations when they receive them for a number of statistically significant differences. More likely to work for smaller companies where there isn't somebody to backfill or support you when you are gone for 3 to 5 days. Women are more likely to work part-time. Again, nobody to backfill you in those smaller companies. And also it's obviously much harder to leave and go to a conference and speak and come back 3 days there, including travel, if you only work 3 days a week in the office. And we are still more statistically likely to be responsible for kids at home. Very hard to be that morning keynote if you've got to put little Johnny on the bus at 8 a.m. So, we've got some systemic reasons why there are women out there less likely to say yes to opportunities for public speaking, but these things could be reversed with partner support. Yes. Okay. Go ahead.
Oh, I just said agreed.
Agreed. Okay. Professional development. 41% say that social opportunities often feel inaccessible to them. And this is right along these same lines, after hour activities. Can you talk a little bit about, that section of the study and the examples and alternatives? Like, if we did these activities in places that were more female friendly, like, what would they be?
When you ask questions in a survey like this, you don't want to point people towards an answer, right? So I think the examples I gave in the ebook were things like golf courses and late night drinks. Those were examples we included, but we wanted to make sure to include like a longer list of examples of what inaccessible or alienating might look like, because it's not just about a gender divide. It's about, a socioeconomic divide sometimes. Sometimes it's about a regional divide. So we asked for things like, does it feel inaccessible due to it being in an expensive restaurant, a remote location, things like that. So we could try to get a cleaner answer, but we still came out with this, again, stark gender divide between women saying that social opportunities with senior leadership just felt much more inaccessible to them. We don't have a ton of detail. We did get some qualitative responses that I included in the wider report about what that felt like to them. But in terms of what they're actually doing, what the actual settings they're having these events in, we don't really have that kind of detail. I think in terms of suggesting what would feel better, what would feel less inaccessible to any group, I think leaders have to think about rotating a diverse calendar of activities to create these opportunities so that you are maximizing the chances that people are going to feel comfortable. You don't want to put it in an overly formal environment, keep it casual. I think, at Kickstand, we do a lot of fun offsite activities that I think feel great and like they'd be accessible to anybody. Things like cooking classes, or, going to a museum, going on like a graffiti tour is something we've done here in Austin. So you just have to get creative. And I'm sure, Leslie, you probably got lots of great ideas on this too.
Yeah, I mean, having, done events through my community work pavilion, and now I'm contracting with marketingops.com to like build out their chapter program and, getting them to do their first events. And, the first things I'm saying is, they can't all be after work. They, maybe you have a breakfast meeting, maybe you have a lunch meeting. The last event I hosted, we hosted it from 4 to 7. So if you could get away during the workday and only stay an hour before you had to go home and do kid duty, you could attend. If you had to go home and do kid duty first, and then come back and attend for an hour, you had that ability. So like even thinking about things like time and then what people's after work responsibilities were, like that alone, can make a big difference. And those are definitely things that, I think about as I'm advising, groups as they organize, local events or in-person events.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Communication style. You had a section in this study about direct and assertive communication style as a choice and it being an issue, the negative perception, the double standard. Do we have any correlation as we move up in the organizations? Are we freer to voice our opinions without being seen negatively?
I mean, this is a nuance I would love to grab from a future data set. The way that we posed the question this time around was we asked respondents to identify whether they identified more with a communication style that was more direct and assertive or more empathetic and collaborative. And for those who said that they identified as direct and assertive, we asked, have you ever been told that you're too aggressive, that you're too intimidating? So we could really get that sort of clean breakdown between the number of men and the number of women who've been told this. Because we asked if you've ever been told if you're too aggressive, we don't really have that nuance of as women move up to become more senior in their orgs, whether this stops being told to them. We only know from this data if it's ever been told to them. But what I did think was interesting in terms of correlation, not necessarily causation, because I wanted to look at this. Women who identified with that direct communication style were 33% more likely within our data set than the overall female average to hold jobs at VP level or higher.
Okay. Leslie, anything from the anecdotal side on this?
I would say those of us that have gone our direct style and have made it to VP and above have still heard that story. I mean, I don't know how many times I have been told that. And for a number of years, I believed that meant that somehow there was something wrong, with the way I spoke. And I do misspeak, and I'm too direct sometimes. But then I decided that I'm just going to be me. I do have one other thing, and I think this does correlate with what we're talking about. Is I remember my oldest daughter, super smart, but also, having some learning challenges. So we went to this place called the Gifted Development Center, like a top, research and everything to get her tested. And in speaking with the woman who was the expert in this, and I said, well, Holly is so bossy. And she schooled me right then and said, she is not bossy. She knows her mind. She speaks up. And she says the number of girls that are called bossy compared to boys, you don't almost never hear the word bossy boy. It's always a bossy girl. And so that is so clear in my mind when she said that. And that was just like, I've been calling this child bossy. And you know what? She's 23 now. She knows her mind. She has a great degree. She runs her own little businesses, and she's direct and she knows what she wants. But I had been calling her bossy for years.
Yeah, we prefer leadership skills around here.
Is that 100% true? 100% true. But that just goes back to that socialization and, like the stigma around women, or in this case, a 6-year-old girl, about speaking up, speaking boldly, telling her mind, permeates from even those who care, that these things are important to. I was still perpetrating the same thing because of everything ingrained inside of what I grew up with.
Absolutely. And you and I probably grew up within, a decade of each other. So we're probably hearing a lot of those same messages. And quiet, was the preferred little girl. Definitely not the very direct approach that we are looking for today. We're running out of time today. Would love to get just some quick hits from both of you. Last words, tips, or advice, on things that you learned that people can take away from today.
I can go first, and it's
Sure.
I talk to a lot of women, obviously, in my job. I'm sure you do as well, Bobby. And sometimes they just need a cheerleader, someone to say, "You can do it. You're amazing," and and we can all play a part in that cheerleader. We can all play a part in, like, yes, you can apply. You should apply. You're amazing, and so I guess that's my takeaway, is like, if you have the ability or the chance to be someone's cheerleader, to give them the motivation or the confidence to go out and step out, then, get the pom-poms.
Excellent. Thank you. Nycole?
I love that. Yeah, I think, probably the biggest takeaway from here, it relates to what Leslie just said, which is like seeing how significant these differences are and the implications, the way that we're subtly encouraging boys to be brave and confident and girls to be quiet and obedient, even when it comes from a place of love, from like wanting our children to be accepted by society. I think just seeing the data like this and seeing the implications and how it sort of turns into these maladaptive behaviors in the corporate world and in adulthood. My hope is that we can take this forward and just be more mindful and intentional about confronting those biases within ourselves on an individual level. And like Leslie said, even when it comes from a place of love. The thing is that these societal lessons are taught during our formative years. They last so long anyway, but then, we also look in this report at the ways that we keep reinforcing them over a lifetime. So I think the other big takeaway, right, is for employers to look at all of these additional barriers and realize that this is not something we can always have natural fallout on, right? This is something we need to put intentional effort towards proactively solving this problem.
Great. Thank you both for joining us today, and thank you, our audience, for listening in and learning with Lioness. Take care.